talk about the barbell deadlift. So our primary movement here for the deadlift is a hinging motion. So let's go over that first. I'll show you from the side so you can get a little bit more of a visual. When we're going through a deadlift, our primary hinging movement here, we are pushing those hips backwards, allowing that chest to stay tall. Head to hips are going to stay in line. And then doing most of the movement at the hips, so think like you're folding like a chair, or like there's a bit of a pulley system between your head and your feet. From here, we're not allowing that chest to essentially just fall over top of the toes or past the toes. We're trying to make sure that we stay chest over tops of the legs. Think center of gravity, right? Pushing your hips farther back than your chest goes forward, okay? From this point as well, our hinging motion is different than your squat, right? A squat, we bend at the knees more. To start with your hinging, right? If we're approaching a bar, if we're getting set up here, we're shoulder width apart, feet slightly pointed out. And then from there, we're thinking, engage that core, squeeze those glutes, keep everything from the head to the end of the tailbone in line as we go through this movement, right? So we're not allowing that chest to arch or puff out. We're not showing that belly button or the rib cage. We're not also rounding those shoulders, okay? So thinking we're keeping as straight of a back as possible through this motion as we can. From there as well, pulling those shoulders back and down, but being in a nice comfortable position, making sure as we go through this motion, we're not holding our breath as well. This is one of our movements that is most dangerous when holding breaths. So try not to hold that breath at any point. And always think away from the ground means most of the time breathing out. So just like a squat, as we go closer to the ground, we're going to inhale, pushing away from the ground, we're exhaling. Same thing here with the deadlift. As we bend down, inhaling, exhaling as we bring that bar off the ground. Hold that bar. Next thing that we're going to talk about here as well, when we are getting set up in our position, if we cannot push our hips back far enough with our shoulders back and we can't touch that bar, we can then actually bend our knees a little bit just to make sure we can get there. And then you'll notice when you start pulling with the bar on the ground, if you can hear that, there's a little bit of a slack between the plates and the bar. So when you go to start, we're gonna actually reset every single time we take a rep today. So when we go back down to the ground, that doesn't mean we have to stand up and get rid of the bar, but we're going to try to, when we set that bar back down through the hinging motion, we're gonna pull that slack a tiny bit. A lot of times just pulling your shoulders back into position again will eliminate that slack. We're gonna pull a tiny bit, push through those feet, and then from there, finish out that rep on the way back down again, making sure we reset. So what that looks like here again, so hinging at the hips, pushing those hips backwards, allowing my chest to stay not past the toes, but over top of the toes. From here, shoulders back, engaging that core, squeezing the glutes, eliminating that slack, breathing in, pushing those hips forward, breathing out, and then reverse on the way back down, right? Keeping everything in line, slow and controlled if you can, all the way back to the ground, setting it down, restarting every single rep. Again, pulling that slack first, making sure everything's engaged every time we take that rep back down to the ground, and then when we start pulling again, making sure everything's engaged, hinge, squeeze through the glutes, push those hips forward, okay? RDLs and deadlifts are very similar, so if you know what an RDL is, or Romanian deadlift, they're both our hinging primary motions of the hinge. So anytime that we think about lowering to the ground, right, again, not letting that belly button sag, but the biggest thing is, right, it's all hip, glute, and hamstring dominant movement here today. So if we can engage the core, keep everything in stable from, tailbone to the head, focusing on those glutes, focusing on those hamstrings, right, feeling that nice pull, feeling that nice stretch when we hinge forward, and then when we push through the ground, doing the actual deadlift motion, that we actually push those hips forward and not just trying to stand up like a squat.
You'll notice here that I use a reverse grip, which is one pronated and supinated hand. This is used for when the weight gets too heavy to ensure that that weight does not fall out of your hands.